Excel 2016, Module 7, Part 4. In this example, we are going to be looking at data validation rules. These are rules that will help us ensure that valid and correct data is being entered into our cells in our application. The first rule we're going to look at is considered a simple rule. So let's get back into Excel workbook called Winter that we have been working with. And we are going to come up to select the registration date. So you're going to click in cell B3. And validation rules can be found on the Data tab because, again, we are trying to ensure that we have valid data entered into our workbook. So we're going to come over under the Data Tools and find the button that says Data Validation, and you're going to click that button. You have 3 tabs for every validation rule that you enter. The first tab is called Settings, and this is where you're actually going to put the rule. Excel defaults to allowing any value. We're going to change that. So I'm going to click on this drop down arrow, and I'm going to specify that in this particular field we can only allow a date. You can also enter a range of valid dates or specify a rule that the date has to adhere to. So in this case, we are going to say the date must be greater than or equal to, and the date we're going to specify is 1/1/2017. So that gives us the rule. Now here, this ignore blanks, if I uncheck that, it will apply this rule to even blank cells. So it will not allow someone to leave it blank. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to go into the input message. Now, the input message is what's going to be displayed when I click in that cell. So notice here I've got a checkbox. Says, do you want this information to be displayed when the cell is selected or clicked on? I'm going to leave that box checked. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to give it a title and a message. So I'm going to type in youth name. Oh, excuse me. No. We're going to type in registration date. And we're going to type in enter the date of registration. When you're doing these on your homework, make sure that you type in exactly what is given to you, including punctuation, and it must not have any typing errors. If you have a typing error in your input message, it will mark your entire rule wrong. Also, on an exam, make sure you fill in the information correctly. If they tell you to enter an appropriate message or an appropriate title, then as long as you would enter information that makes sense based on the field you're working with, then it would be correct. So we're going to go over to the error alert. Excuse me. And we're going to enter these pieces of information. Okay, what type of error is this? Is it a stop? Is it a warning? Can I continue on if there is a problem? So we're going to start out here and we're going to say that this is a warning. Once you specify the type, then we are going to tell it a title again and also a message. And this is what is going to pop up if invalid data is entered. So it's going to say invalid registration date. And then I'm going to go ahead and type in a message that says enter a registration date after 1/1/2017. Technically, that's what the book said, but it is incorrect. You would need to say on or after, because we said it could be equal to 1/1/2017. Then the next thing I'm going to say is if the date you entered is correct, click yes. So we're giving the user some instructions what to do when this error message box pops up. It's going to have 3 responses on this box: yes, no, or cancel. So I'm telling them, you know, if the error message or if the date you entered is correct, so for example, they really did register on 12/15/2016, then click yes. Because a warning message will not stop the transaction. They will let us continue. The next thing we want to do is say if it is incorrect, then click no. And finally, if you are not sure, click cancel. Once I've entered all the appropriate information on all 3 tabs, I'm going to click OK. When I come back, it is going to, when I click in the cell, it'll display my input message. If I enter a date that violates the rule, I should have an error message pop up. So one thing that you would want to do to test this rule would be to type something that was not a date. So maybe I would type in 3/35/17. And as you can see, it recognized that that was not a date. So I can click no. When I click no, it takes me back to the screen and I can enter it again. So if I typed in 12/15/16, since that is before 1/1/17, I also get that. So if I click no, you see it brought me back. If I click cancel, it does one extra thing. It brings the data back to the way it was. If you have a bad date in there, so let's say we just entered 5, and all you do is click no, it does not revert the data back. So you would have to click escape and set that data back so that you have a valid value in there again. Okay, let's go down to the youth name. On this particular field, we don't necessarily have a rule, but we'd like to put a validation rule on here so that an input box will open up. So I can go to validation, hit the drop down, and choose data validation. If I go to settings, I want it to allow any value. I have no rules on what's allowed in this field. I'm also not going to have an error message, but I do want an input message. So I'm going to type in here, name, and as the input, it's going to say enter the youth's first and last names. And then I might add, the text didn't do this, but I might say this should not be the parent or guardian name. And click OK. Now that is what is going to be displayed when I click in a cell. So that kind of shows you the simple rules. Okay, going back to our registration date, if I open up the data validation again, I'm going to look at the settings. Notice you can set simple rules for a lot of different things. I can say that the time, it has to be a time, it has to be a whole number, it could be a decimal number. So you can do things that you can put these simple rules to. I have to have a whole number greater than 0. So that's working with these simple rules. Between certain items, equal to, greater than, less than. And then also, I'm going to cancel this, being able to input an input message as well as an error alert. You want to remember on the errors, a warning or an information alert are not going to stop the data entry. So even if it thinks it's invalid, it will allow me to continue. A stop style will not allow me to move on to the next field until I correct that. So next thing we're going to look at are list types of validation rules.